every administration of the last three administrations has in different ways undermined the press's ability to do its business in very different ways. The Bush administration was just very adept at manipulating, taking advantage of the inefficiencies of the press to present an otherwise indefensible agenda, an otherwise indefensible conduct, just failures that, had they been not as well presented to the press, would have resulted in impeachment, in extreme case. Barack Obama was different in that he was someone who had a lot of goodwill going in. And just as always been the case in American politics, where a Republican can do certain things like Nixon can go recognize China and Bill Clinton can pursue welfare reform because Nixon's a Republican, you don't expect a Republican to do that, and Clinton's a Democrat and so on. That means that the Obama administration was actually well positioned to impinge upon the ability of the press to do its job because they did have that goodwill that helped to facilitate that. It helped to make it seem like less of an extreme thing than it was. Now we have Trump, whose job is to maintain a constituency that is immune to facts and is immune to investigation and condemnation. And that's a very different animal that we're dealing with.
Fake news is a household term now. We not even half a term down. And yet it's looking like the world gon' burn down. I'm worried. He tweeting out the words that's heard round the planet. Immortalized but fact proof. Why should I even bother to have my story be backed by truth? The powerful ain't worried, they got more to make. Their fortune's safe, they already on their fourth estate. Of course that makes the smaller baits fate seem sorta gravely, especially when they're reporting sense and I play it safely. I'm talking more than bravery, something they swore maybe. And then I writing about puff pieces and pastries. When you water down the merit, expect erosion. And when you yelling at an avalanche, then you get snowed in. And when you rising and they threaten you into disclosing, you start to question the direction that we're going.
I think the general idea is that the public does respect their press and that institution of journalism in their country. I think that what's going on here in the US, there was already a problem before the election, but I think it's really was tapped into by President Trump during his election. He really played to that underlying distrust and kind of amplified it. And so now it's really much of a bigger problem and it needs to be addressed because the relationship between Trump bashing the press and then the press that kind of pushes back and says, no, actually we are just doing our job, but then their coverage is very aggressive and fact-based, and sometimes people are portraying that as just being negative coverage all the time. There has to be a distinction drawn between the way Trump uses the term and the actual concept of false information, and then also distinguish that from propaganda. So people that are sitting on their computer and actually churning out stories of innuendo that really have nothing to do with fact, that's what we're typically referred to as fake news.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
And the way Trump is using the term is literally to label any media outlet or any journalist or any story that's unfavorable to him or that he just doesn't like the story because it's a critical story. That's his fallback accusation.
Because they have no sources, they just make them up when there are none. I saw one story recently where they said 9 people have confirmed. There are no 9 people. I don't believe there was 1 or 2 people. 9 people. And I said, give me a break, because I know the people. I know who they talk to. There were no 9 people, but they say 9 people. And somebody reads it, and they think, 9 people, they have 9 sources. They make up sources.
I think it gives the repressive governments green light, either to keep doing what they've been doing or to step up what they were doing kind of in small instances, maybe hoping the US wouldn't notice. And then when the US does make statements, because sometimes statements come out of the State Department that are very strong and condemn, for example, I think there was a Wall Street Journal reporter who does live here in the US, but she was sentenced to prison in Turkey in absentia. And I think there was a very strong statement coming out of the State Department condemning that decision. But when you have that statement and then a week later, 2 weeks later, the president calling for the revoking of media licenses, I think that sends a really mixed signal to these foreign governments and these authoritarian leaders who want to crack down on the press, and actually who do have countries where they control the media licenses based on loyalty to the political party that's in power.
Go ahead.
Sure. No, Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are
is
attacking our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give us a
is
chance
terrible.
to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can
Quiet.
you state,
Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking
categorically,
a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No,
give
I'm
us
not
a
going to give you
question?
I'm not going to give you a
Can you
question.
can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
Go ahead.
can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not
Go ahead.
appropriate.
I think press freedom in the United States is really complicated. You know, on one hand, the First Amendment is still alive and fairly well, which means that newspapers do have the freedom to basically publish what they want without being censored, which is a very important thing that we shouldn't forget, that almost all countries don't have something like the First Amendment, and it does allow newspapers to publish this type of information where they could be prosecuted in other countries. But at the same time, the government attacks them from all sorts of different angles, not related to the actual publishing. So they'll go after the leakers or the whistleblowers and the sources. They'll conduct surveillance on journalists.
The Associated Press says that the U.S. Justice Department has been secretly monitoring them for over 2 months. During that time, the DOJ collected telephone records of reporters and editors at the AP. The Associated Press called this, quote, a massive and unprecedented intrusion into how news organizations gather the news.
In some cases, they'll even subpoena them to force them to testify or try to force them to testify. And now we're seeing with Trump this kind of daily barrage of insults that he's throwing at the press to try to delegitimize what they report about him so that no one will believe it.
If you want to discover the source of the division in our country, look no further than the fake news and the crooked media, which would rather get ratings and clicks than tell the truth.
And so these are certainly attacks on the general principles of press freedom and are very concerning, especially when you, over the long run, where these newspapers, especially with them financially hurting, can be kind of run into the ground by this constant legal and public pressure that they face from government officials. While I think that it's in many ways the U.S. still has the most vibrant and free press in the world, there are many other ways where these rights are being eroded, and it's important for the public to be aware that these rights are not just for journalists, they're for everyone. We receive information through these journalists as a conduit, and it is a really important safety valve of democracy that we don't want to lose.
Claim you love joy but promote hate. Oh, it's only okay if it's home base. If it's a foe, they go ruthless and that has no place. But right here, you don't like someone, license revoked today. Open season if you don't toe the line. No shield laws, decline, motion denied. Oh, so you silencing the folks that's already quiet. That's not just petty, but it's damn near violent. Hypocritical men, criticize and condemn. Demonize dictators, but legitimize them. Finger on the bomb trigger, but still scared of a pen. There's layers to get within, I'm not here to pretend. Careful with the type of mixed signals you send. There's blood on the ink, it could give life or it could shed. It can set an example, or trample and oppress, or be a shining light in this mess.